I'm Ashwini Reed, and I have a confession that my coworkers at Bellhaven Regional would find hilarious. For 11 months, I hated a man I'd never actually met. I knew his handwriting, sharp, slanted, the kind that made other nurses groan when they saw it on a chart. I knew his reputation, which arrived at every shift change wrapped in a different complaint. Dr. Okafor doesn't return pages fast enough. Dr. Okafor argues with cardiology. Dr. Okafor made a first-year resident cry outside the elevator. I built him in my head out of secondhand stories the way you build a villain out of shadows on a wall, and by the time I actually stood across from him at 2 a.m, I was ready for the fight. "You're the one holding my patient's labs hostage," he said. No hello, no name. Just that, delivered flat and tired across the nurse's station, his badge turned backward on its lanyard like he'd forgotten it was there. "I'm the one who paged you 4 times in 40 minutes, I said. "And I'm Ashwini, since apparently nobody's introduced us in 11 months of working the same unit." Something in his face shifted, just barely. 11 months. You didn't know that either. He looked at me for a second too long, like he was recalculating something. "I thought you were older," he finally said, which was such a strange, useless thing to say that I almost laughed. "I thought you were meaner." That got a real smile out of him, quick and surprised, gone before it fully landed. We handled the labs. We handled the patient. And somewhere in the next 40 minutes, working side by side over a chart neither of us wanted to be reading at that hour, the villain in my head quietly dissolved and a person took his place. Someone who apologized, twice, for snapping at me over the phone back in October without knowing it had been me on the other end. "I remember that call," I admitted. "I went home and complained about you to my roommate for 20 minutes. "That tracks," he said. "I went home and complained about the nurse who wouldn't budge on the labs to my dog, who did not care. I want to tell you it was simple after that, but reputations are stubborn things, even the ones you've personally dismantled." I kept catching myself bracing for the version of him I'd built out of gossip, and he told me later he'd done the same with me, the nurse who supposedly never gave an inch, who he'd privately nicknamed The Wall before he knew my name. We spent the next few weeks unlearning each other in doorways and supply closets, comparing the myths against the man, the myths against the woman, until neither of us quite remembered why we'd believed them in the first place. The turn came on a Thursday, ordinary in every way except that we ended up alone in the physician's lounge at 4 a.m., both too wired to sleep, both pretending to read things we weren't reading. He asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime, actual coffee, outside the building, in daylight, and I said yes before I'd finished deciding whether that was a good idea. Here's what still gets me, months later, ring on my finger, and his dog now unfortunately attached to me too. How much of what almost kept us apart was never actually about either of us. It was static, borrowed opinions, repeated until they hardened into fact. I think about the version of me that almost avoided him permanently because of stories that turned out to be half true at best. And I wonder how many good things get talked out of existence before they ever get a chance. How many people we decide we know before we've said a single word to them. I don't have a tidy answer for that. I just know I got lucky enough to find out I was wrong.